I am Claire, 33 years old, and after my husband threw me out into the pouring rain without a single cent, I thought my life was completely over. When I tried to use an old card my father had left me, the bank manager turned pale, slung open his door, and shouted for everyone to move aside. I was in complete shock when I discovered that my late father had secretly left me an empire, and my ex-husband had unknowingly borrowed millions from a firm I now owned. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. It was a Tuesday evening, and the rain in our suburban Connecticut neighborhood was coming down in relentless sheets. Cold water soaked straight through my coat, clinging to my skin. As I walked up the paved walkway of the house I had called home for 4 years, I was utterly exhausted. As a UX researcher for an educational technology company, I had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift analyzing user data, desperately trying to keep my head above water at work while my personal life crumbled. All I wanted was to step inside, take a hot shower, and crash onto the couch. I reached out my shivering hand and typed my usual 6-digit PIN into the sleek smart lock on the front door. The keypad chimed 3 times with a sharp, harsh red flash. Access denied. I frowned, thinking my fingers were just too wet. So, I wiped the glass screen with my sleeve and carefully punched in the numbers again. Access denied. The lock buzzed mechanically, rejecting me a second time. My heart did a sudden, uncomfortable flip in my chest. Before I could even pull my phone out to check if the electronic system was glitching, the heavy oak door swung open from the inside. Standing in the warm golden glow of the foyer was my 35-year-old husband, Harrison. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy sweater and slacks, holding a glass of scotch in his right hand. But he was not alone. Flanking him on his left, wearing an oversized silk robe that I recognized instantly because it belonged to me, was Kendall. At 28, Kendall was a commercial real estate broker, a woman Harrison had introduced to me 6 months ago as a prospective client for his venture capital firm. Harrison did not smile, nor did he look surprised to see me shivering under the dark sky. He simply took a slow sip of his drink and looked down at me as if I were a stray dog on his porch. I stood there, water dripping from my hair onto my face, my eyes darting from his cold face to Kendall, who was leaning casually against the doorframe with a smug, victorious smirk. "What is going on, Harrison?" I asked, my voice trembling from the freezing cold and a sudden wave of nausea. "Why is my code not working? And why is Kendall wearing my robe?" Harrison did not answer me right away. Instead, he casually pointed his glass toward the manicured front lawn. I turned my head following his gesture and felt my breath catch in my throat. Sitting right there in the muddy grass, completely exposed to the torrential downpour, were 3 large black garbage bags. One of them had ripped open at the seam, and I could see my clothes, my books, and the framed photograph of my late father soaking in the mud. Harrison stepped forward onto the covered porch, pulling a thick stack of papers from his back pocket. Without a word of explanation, he tossed the documents directly at my feet. The pages scattered across the wet concrete, instantly getting soaked. "Pack your things and get off my property," Harrison said, his voice flat, devoid of a single drop of emotion. "We are done, Claire. Those are your divorce papers." I stared at the papers on the ground, then looked up at him in sheer disbelief. "Are you insane?" I yelled over the sound of the falling rain. "You cannot just throw me out of my own house. We bought this place together. I paid for half of the down payment with my savings. My name is on the mortgage." Harrison let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the sound of the thunder. "Your name?" he sneered, taking a step closer to the edge of the porch while Kendall crossed her arms, watching the spectacle with delight. "Do not make me laugh, Claire. You contribute a pathetic UX researcher salary. You make peanuts compared to what it takes to maintain a lifestyle in this zip code. You think your little contribution gives you rights here." He leaned in, his eyes narrowing with pure malice. "Let me educate you on how the real world works. 3 months ago, I restructured the ownership. I leveraged this house as collateral against a credit line for my firm. I own the debt, which means I own the equity. You have no standing here. You are a financial ghost in this house, Claire. You brought nothing into this marriage, and you are leaving with nothing." The sheer arrogance in his voice made my blood boil. For 3 years, I had watched him play high-stakes games with other people's money, but I never imagined he would use his corporate maneuvers to strip me of my own home. I looked at Kendall, who let out a soft giggle, adjusting the belt of my robe. "Hi is right," Claire Kendall added, her tone dripping with condescension. "Harrison needs a real partner, someone who understands high finance and real estate, not a glorified paper pusher who cries every time work gets stressful. You should really just take your bags and leave before you embarrass yourself any further." Something inside me snapped. The years of suppressing my anger, of trying to be the supportive, quiet wife, while Harrison chased his corporate ambitions, evaporated in an instant. I stepped up onto the porch, intending to push past him to grab my purse, my keys, and demand to speak to a lawyer, right from the kitchen phone. "I am not going anywhere," I said firmly, my voice shaking with rage as I tried to step around Harrison. "This is my legal residence, and you cannot lock me out without a court order." Harrison did not even bother to block my path with his body. He simply raised his arm, pointed his finger toward the street, and smirked. "Go ahead, try it," he said calmly. Just then, bright red and blue lights illuminated the rain-drenched street. The low rumble of an engine filled the air as 2 police cruisers pulled up along the curb, their emergency lights flashing against the wet trees. I froze on the porch steps, staring at the flashing lights in utter confusion. Harrison took a slow sip of his scotch and smiled, a cold, calculated look that chilled me more than the freezing rain. "I called the precinct 20 minutes ago," Harrison whispered, leaning down so only I could hear him over the storm. "I told them a disgruntled, unstable former employee was trying to break into my private residence and harass my fiancé. If you take one more step toward this door, Claire, I will have them arrest you for hostile trespassing. Let us see how your little tech job handles a mug shot on your record." The heavy boots of the 2 police officers sloshed against the wet pavement as they approached the porch. One officer rested his hand casually on his utility belt, while the other stepped between Harrison and me. They did not look at the garbage bags on the lawn or my soaking wet clothes. They only looked at Harrison, who instantly transformed his demeanor from a mocking predator to a concerned, exhausted homeowner. "Officer, thank you for arriving so quickly," Harrison said smoothly. His voice was practically dripping with manufactured relief. "My ex-wife is having a difficult time accepting the separation boundaries. I just need her escorted off the premises so my fiancé and I can have a peaceful evening." I tried to speak, but the cold rain and the sheer shock of his lies made my jaw tremble. "I live here," I managed to say, pointing a shaking finger at the front door. "My name is on the mortgage. He literally locked me out 20 minutes ago." The older officer turned to me, his expression entirely neutral. "Ma, if there is a domestic dispute over property ownership, that is a civil matter for the family courts. Right now, the resident inside has asked you to leave. If you refuse, we will have to detain you for trespassing and disturbing the peace." I looked at the officers, then back at Harrison. Kendall was peeking out from behind his shoulder, holding a manicured hand over her mouth to hide her grin. The police were not going to help me. The law in this exact moment was firmly on the side of the man standing inside the warm, dry house. I swallowed the bitter lump in my throat, nodded silently, and stepped backward off the porch. I walked into the muddy grass and grabbed the torn plastic garbage bags. The officers watched me drag my ruined belongings down the driveway and out of the neighborhood, cul-de-sac. I hauled the heavy soaking bags for 3 blocks until I reached a small, dimly lit bus stop shelter. The plastic awning barely kept the wind out, but it offered a temporary shield from the torrential downpour. I dropped the bags onto the concrete and leaned against the cold glass of the shelter. My teeth chattered violently. I needed to get out of the cold. I needed a hot shower and a bed. And then I would hire the most aggressive divorce attorney in the state first thing in the morning. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. The screen was smeared with rain, but I managed to open my banking app. Harrison and I shared a joint savings account. We had been pooling our money for years, ostensibly for a larger property or an emergency fund. I knew exactly how much was in there. $62,000. I plan to transfer 5,000 to my personal checking account to cover a decent hotel for the week and a retainer for a lawyer. The app loaded. The screen flashed white, then blue, displaying my dashboard. I blinked, wiping the rainwater from my eyes, sure that the screen was glitching due to the storm. Available balance $0. My heart slammed against my ribs. I frantically tapped on the transaction history. The ledger loaded, showing a single massive transfer executed exactly 4 hours ago. Harrison had authorized a wire transfer of the entire $62,000 into a private external account. A wave of pure panic washed over me. I checked my personal checking account. It showed a balance of $14 because my paycheck was directly deposited into our joint account. I had virtually no cash to my name. I felt the air leave my lungs as the brutal reality of state financial law crashed down on me. In our state, any individual named on a joint bank account has the legal right to withdraw the entire balance without the consent or knowledge of the other party. It was a vicious, completely legal maneuver, and Harrison had timed it perfectly. He had wiped out my entire life savings just hours before serving me the divorce papers. My phone buzzed in my freezing hand, startling me. A new text message appeared on the screen. It was an unknown number, but the attached image loaded instantly. It was a photograph of Kendall's hand resting on the steering wheel of Harrison's luxury SUV. On her ring finger sat a massive, ostentatiously large diamond ring. It caught the light, perfectly sparkling, with a price tag that made my stomach churn. Below the image was a text. Harrison's startup money finally bought me the life I deserve. Have a nice night in the rain, sweetie. I stared at the glowing screen. Startup money. Harrison had not used his firm's capital. He had taken my savings, the money I had earned working endless 12-hour shifts, analyzing data to buy his mistress a diamond ring. He had stolen my past to fund her future. I shoved the phone into my pocket, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a response. I dragged my garbage bags to where I had parked my car earlier that morning. My 10-year-old Honda Civic sat under a street lamp, looking battered and incredibly small against the backdrop of the wealthy neighborhood. I shoved the bags into the trunk, climbed into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. My hands shook violently as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered before roaring to life. I turned the heater on full blast, but it only blew lukewarm air. I put the car in drive and headed toward the highway, searching for the cheapest roadside motel I could find. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the flickering neon parking lot of a budget motel. The lobby smelled heavily of bleach and stale cigarette smoke. I stood at the front desk, leaving puddles of rainwater on the linoleum floor, and pulled out my primary credit card. I need a room for the night, I told the night clerk, pushing my wet hair out of my face. He took the card, ran it through the machine, and frowned. The machine beeped aggressively. Declined, he said in a bored tone, handing the card back. That is impossible, I replied, my voice rising in panic. Try it again, please. He swiped it a second time. The same harsh beep echoed in the quiet lobby, declined again. Ma'am, do you have another card or cash? I fumbled through my wallet, pulling out my secondary credit card. He swiped it, declined. I pulled out a third card, a backup I kept for emergencies, declined. I stepped away from the counter, my face burning with humiliation, and dialed the customer service number on the back of the primary card. An automated voice answered cheerfully, informing me that my account had been closed by the primary account holder. Harrison was the primary account holder on all our credit lines. I was only an authorized user. He had called the credit card companies and canceled every single one of my supplementary cards. He had meticulously cut off every avenue of financial survival, trapping me in an invisible cage of poverty. I walked out of the motel lobby, the harsh neon lights reflecting in the puddles around my worn-out shoes. I got back into my Civic and sat behind the steering wheel. I had $14 to my name. I had no access to credit. I had no savings. I reached into the back seat, pulling a damp sweater from one of the ripped garbage bags and wrapped it around my shivering shoulders. I reclined the driver's seat as far back as it would go. The rain continued to hammer against the windshield, sounding like a steady drumbeat of defeat. I curled into a tight ball in the freezing cabin of my 10-year-old sedan. The cold seeped into my bones, but the physical chill was nothing compared to the absolute, terrifying realization that the man I had loved for years had meticulously engineered my total destruction. I woke up the next morning to the harsh glare of the early sun piercing through the rain-streaked windshield of my Honda Civic. Every muscle in my body locked in a stiff, unnatural position from sleeping curled around the steering wheel. The air inside the cabin was freezing thick with the damp condensation of my own breath. I sat up slowly, my head pounding with a dull, relentless ache that radiated down my neck. I had survived the night, but survival was not going to pay for a lawyer, a hot meal, or a hotel room. I needed to go to work. I needed to log into the corporate server, keep my job, and figure out a strategic plan to fight back. But my primary work laptop was currently sitting in a garbage bag on the front lawn of the house I used to own, ruined by the storm. Then I remembered a small sliver of luck. Last Sunday, I had visited Harrison's younger sister, Stella, to help her set up a new smart home security system. I had brought my backup work laptop with me and absent-mindedly left it on her kitchen island. It was my only lifeline to my job, my only remaining connection to a stable paycheck. I forced my numb fingers to turn the ignition key. The engine coughed twice before sputtering to life, the heater still blowing useless lukewarm air. I pulled out of the dingy motel parking lot and navigated the heavy morning traffic toward the affluent gated community where Stella lived. At 30 years old, Stella had always mirrored her brother's profound arrogance. She lived in a sprawling modern farmhouse, funded entirely by her husband Jamal. Jamal was a 32-year-old independent auditor, a brilliant and quiet African-American man who always seemed entirely out of place among Harrison's loud, boastful, and incredibly toxic family. Jamal was the only one who ever treated me with genuine respect, often offering a sympathetic smile when Stella made her cutting remarks at holiday dinners. I parked my battered sedan at the end of Stella's pristine paverstone driveway. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair was damp and tangled, my eyes bloodshot, and my clothes deeply wrinkled from sleeping in them. I looked exactly like the broken woman Harrison wanted me to be. I took a deep breath, gathered whatever shred of dignity I had left, and walked up to the heavy mahogany front door. I rang the doorbell twice, waiting in the crisp morning air. The door swung open. Stella stood there in expensive designer yoga pants, holding a steaming mug of artisanal coffee. She did not look surprised to see my disheveled, freezing state. In fact, a cruel, knowing smile spread across her perfectly made-up face. Harrison had clearly already called her to gloat about the lockout. "I am just here for my backup laptop," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible, refusing to let her see me shiver. "I left it on your kitchen counter last week. I need it for work. Please just hand it to me and I will leave your property." Stella took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, leaning her shoulder against the doorframe to physically block the entrance. Her eyes ran over my rumpled clothes and muddy shoes with absolute disgust. "You really have no shame, Claire," she sneered, her voice dripping with venom, "showing up here looking like a homeless person. Harrison told me you caused a massive scene last night in front of the neighbors. Honestly, you should be entirely embarrassed by your behavior." I stared at her, my hands balling into tight fists at my sides. "He locked me out of my own house and stole my entire life savings. Stella, he committed financial abuse." "Oh, please." Stella laughed, a harsh grating sound that echoed in the quiet suburban street. "He took back what rightfully belonged to him. You were just a placeholder, Claire. A boring, low-earning placeholder. Harrison is building an empire. He needs a woman who matches his ambition, not a pathetic researcher who cannot even give him children." The comment about my infertility felt like a physical strike to the chest, stealing the air from my lungs. Stella knew exactly how many grueling, painful medical treatments I had endured trying to build a family with her brother. She knew how thoroughly the clinical failures had broken my heart. Yet, she wielded that trauma like a weapon. "Kendall is a powerhouse," Stella continued, clearly relishing the pain flashing across my face. "She just closed a $5 million commercial real estate deal yesterday." $5 million, Claire. That is what a real partner looks like. She is a winner. You are just dead weight holding my brother back. My vision blurred with a volatile mix of exhaustion and absolute fury. Dead weight. I repeated, my voice rising above a whisper. I spent my entire 20s carrying this family when your mother got sick with early onset dementia. Where were you? You were backpacking through Europe on Harrison's dime. Where was Harrison? He was working late to build his so-called empire. I was the one changing her clothes. I was the one managing her complex medications, taking her to every single doctor's appointment and holding her hand while she forgot her own name. I sacrificed my youth, my career growth, and my peace of mind to care for your mother, while you all looked the other way. Stella rolled her eyes, completely unmoved by the undeniable truth. That was your basic duty as a wife, she scoffed. You lived under our family's roof. You ate our food. You enjoyed the luxurious lifestyle my brother provided. Caring for our mother was the bare minimum you could do to pay your rent. Harrison owes you absolutely nothing for that. In fact, you owe him for putting up with your mediocrity for this long. I stood frozen on the pristine welcome mat. The sheer rewrite of history, the utter lack of humanity in her words, left me entirely speechless. They had eagerly consumed my time, my savings, and my youth. And now they were brazenly rewriting the narrative to make me the villain. There was no point in arguing with someone who viewed basic human compassion as a financial transaction. Just give me my laptop, I said, my voice dropping to a cold, flat tone. I am not leaving this porch without it. You can buy a new one with your non-existent savings, Stella spat. Have a terrible life, Claire. She grabbed the heavy brass handle and moved to violently slam the mahogany door right in my face. But before the heavy wood could click into the frame, a large, strong hand reached out from the shadows of the foyer and caught the edge of the door, stopping it dead with a loud thud. Stella gasped and stepped back in shock. Jamal stepped into the doorway, moving completely in front of his wife. He was already dressed in a sharp gray suit for his accounting firm, but his tie was loosened and his face was unusually pale. Jamal looked down at me, and I immediately saw it in his eyes. He was not looking at me with the usual quiet pity he displayed at family dinners. He was looking at me with intense, unspoken anxiety. Jamal stepped firmly past his wife, ignoring her loud gasp of indignation. "What on earth are you doing?" Stella shrieked, reaching out to grab the sleeve of his tailored suit jacket. Jamal did not even look at her. He kept his eyes locked on mine, his expression a tight mask of absolute urgency. In his left hand, he held my black nylon laptop bag. He extended it toward me. I reached out with trembling fingers to take the handle. As my skin brushed against his, I felt something else. Jamal flipped his wrist slightly, pressing a tightly wadded, crumpled piece of paper directly into the center of my palm. He squeezed my hand shut around it, a silent but desperate command to keep it hidden from his wife. Stella grabbed his shoulder, her sharp manicured nails digging into the expensive fabric of his suit. "Get away from her, Jamal," she yelled, her face twisting with ugly rage. I told her to get off our property. Jamal allowed his wife to pull him backward, but as he retreated into the foyer, he leaned forward just an inch. "He did not just take the house," Jamal whispered rapidly, his deep voice barely carrying over the sound of the morning wind. "Look at the corporate filings from last month." Before I could even process his words or ask a single question, Stella aggressively yanked him back inside. She grabbed the heavy brass handle and slammed the mahogany door shut with a deafening crack. The deadbolt slid into place with a sharp, heavy click, locking me out once again. I stood frozen on the porch for a long moment, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. I looked down at my closed fist. My knuckles were entirely white. Whatever Jamal had just given me, it was dangerous enough that he had to sneak it past his own wife. I turned around and sprinted down the paver-stone driveway, desperate to get back to the isolated safety of my car. I threw the heavy laptop bag onto the passenger seat of my 10-year-old Honda Civic and slammed the driver's side door shut. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely peel my fingers open. I placed the crumpled ball of paper on the steering wheel and began to carefully smooth out the deep creases. The paper was slightly damp from my sweaty palm, but the black ink was perfectly legible. It was a printed spreadsheet, heavily cropped, and clearly printed in a rush from a secure accounting database. At the very top, the header read Commercial Debt Obligation and Collateral Summary. I scanned the columns, my eyes darting across the rows of complex financial jargon until they locked onto a specific string of numbers. It was the exact address of the suburban home I had bought with Harrison. I traced my finger across the row. The document outlined a massive high-interest business loan issued exactly 30 days ago. The borrower was Harrison's venture capital firm. The collateral securing the debt was my primary residence, and the total loan amount was a staggering $2 million. The air vanished from the small cabin of my car. A cold, suffocating panic gripped my chest. $2 million. Harrison had not just restructured the ownership of our home to kick me out. He had secretly leveraged the entire property to secure an enormous injection of cash for his failing startup, but that was legally impossible. My name was still on the original deed and the mortgage. No legitimate bank would ever approve a collateral lien of that magnitude without the explicit notarized signature of both homeowners unless he forged it. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. The smug look on Harrison's face the night before suddenly made perfect, terrifying sense. He had drained our joint savings to fund his immediate lifestyle. But the real money, the millions he needed to keep his arrogant facade alive, was tied directly to this fraudulent loan. If his venture capital firm defaulted on those payments, the bank would immediately seize the house. He had literally gambled my only asset on his own reckless ego. Jamal was an auditor. He had access to the raw financial data of Harrison's firm, and he had just handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy my ex-husband. If I could get to the local bank branch and contest the lien, if I could prove to the loan officers that I never signed the collateral agreement, the bank would instantly freeze Harrison's accounts, pending a federal fraud investigation. I shoved the crumpled paper deep into the front pocket of my damp jeans. I grabbed my car keys, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The crushing despair from the night before evaporated, replaced by a razor-sharp, blinding fury. I thrust the key into the ignition and twisted it hard. The engine roared to life. I reached for the gear shift to throw the car into drive. Suddenly, a massive, violent jolt rocked the entire vehicle. The impact was so severe, my head snapped backward, hitting the headrest. A loud metallic crunch echoed through the quiet suburban street, followed by the high-pitched whine of industrial hydraulics. I gasped, my hands flying up to brace myself against the steering wheel. I looked in the rearview mirror, my eyes widening in pure horror. A massive yellow tow truck had silently backed down the cul-de-sac and positioned itself directly behind my Civic. The driver, a burly man in a neon safety vest, was standing at the rear of my vehicle, operating a control panel. Thick metal arms had already clamped tightly around my rear tires, hoisting the back of my car 2 feet into the air. "Hey!" I screamed, throwing the car door open and stumbling out into the street. "What are you doing?" "Put my car down. You cannot tow this. I am parked legally." The driver did not even flinch. He casually pulled a thick clipboard from his heavy jacket and walked toward me, his expression completely bored. "Are you Claire?" he asked, glancing down at a sheet of paper. "Yes," I yelled, waving my arms frantically. "Put the car down right now. I have to go to the bank." "This is a massive mistake." "No mistake, lady," the driver said flatly, tapping his pen against the clipboard. "This is a court-ordered repossession. Your lender issued the recovery order yesterday afternoon. The account is completely delinquent." "Delinquent?" I repeated, shaking my head in total confusion. "That is impossible. The payments on this car are automatically deducted from my checking account every single month." "I have never missed a payment in my life," the driver sighed, flipping to the second page of his documents. "I do not know what to tell you. The primary co-signer on the auto loan contacted the lender 3 months ago, canceled the automatic payments, and explicitly refused to cover the balance. The account is 90 days past due." The lender called the entire note. "The car belongs to the bank now." My vision swam as the brutal reality of the trap closed around me. The primary co-signer, Harrison. He had co-signed the auto loan 5 years ago, when my credit was too new to get a decent interest rate. He had deliberately logged into the portal, canceled the auto draft, and let the account default all while I blissfully assumed the payments were clearing. He had orchestrated this months in advance. He wanted me completely immobilized. He wanted me trapped peniles and entirely dependent on his non-existent mercy. Please, I begged, the anger draining out of me, replaced by a desperate, humiliating panic. You cannot take my car. Everything I have left in the world is in the trunk. My clothes, my father's picture, everything. Just give me 24 hours. The driver shook his head, completely unmoved by my desperation. Take your personal belongings out of the cabin, lady. You have exactly 60 seconds before I drive away with this vehicle. If you interfere, I am legally required to call the police. And given what I just heard, I do not think you want the cops showing up again. I stared at him, completely defeated. I turned round and reached into the passenger seat, grabbing my laptop bag. That was all I could carry. The trunk was locked, and the hydraulic lift angle made it impossible to open safely. My clothes, my shoes. The last remaining memories of my childhood were entirely trapped inside a vehicle I no longer owned. I stood on the cold pavement, clutching the laptop bag to my chest, and watched in utter silence as the tow truck pulled away. The flashing Yeso lights disappeared around the corner of the affluent neighborhood, taking away my last shred of independence. I was entirely alone, standing on the side of a road 3 miles away from the commercial district, with $0 to my name and a forged $2 million loan statement burning a hole in my pocket. I took my first step forward away from the empty curb, the cold rain instantly soaking through the thin canvas of my ruined sneakers. I had 3 miles of winding suburban roads between me and the nearest commercial bank branch. I gripped my laptop bag tightly against my chest to shield it from the relentless downpour. Every step sent a sharp jolt of pain up my calves, my feet slipping inside waterlogged shoes. Expensive luxury cars sped past me on the slick asphalt, their heavy tires spraying freezing sheets of muddy water against my bare legs. Not a single driver slowed down in this wealthy zip code. A woman walking in the rain without an umbrella was not considered a neighbor in distress. She was simply an eyes sore. I kept my head down, forcing my frozen legs to keep moving forward. The physical agony was intense, but the burning rage in my chest kept me entirely warm. I touched the outside of my damp pocket, feeling the outline of the crumpled corporate loan statement Jamal had secretly given me. Harrison thought he had completely immobilized me. He thought destroying my credit, stealing my savings, and taking my car would force me to crawl back to him and beg for his mercy. He vastly underestimated my endurance. I walked for over an hour, my breathing turning into heavy gasps. By the time the sprawling glass and steel facade of the commercial bank finally came into view, I pushed through the heavy revolving doors, immediately bringing a thick trail of muddy water onto the pristine marble floor of the lobby. The aggressive air conditioning blasted against my soaked clothes, making my teeth chatter violently. The bank was mostly empty at this hour, save for a few wealthy clients sipping complimentary espresso on plush leather couches. They all turned to stare at me with undisguised disgust. I ignored them completely. I marched straight past the velvet security ropes and approached the desk of a junior teller. She was a young woman with a perfectly structured blowout and a highly condescending smile, typing leisurely on a mechanical keyboard. I did not wait for her to greet me. I dropped my heavy laptop bag onto the floor, reached into my pocket, and slapped the damp, crumpled commercial loan statement directly onto her immaculate glass counter. I need to pull the complete transaction history on this property immediately, I demanded, my voice, but entirely steady. My name is Claire, and I am the primary co-owner of the residential collateral listed on that sheet. The signature authorizing this $2 million loan is a complete forgery. I need you to freeze the dispersal accounts and escalate this to your fraud department right now. The junior teller blinked clearly, taken aback by my authoritative tone. She leaned back in her plush ergonomic chair, her eyes scanning my dripping hair, my wrinkled clothes, and the growing puddle of dirty rainwater forming around my ruined shoes. Her condescending smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer unprofessional disdain. She used a single manicured fingernail to slide the damp paper closer to her keyboard. "Ma'am," she said, dragging out the word with deliberate slowness, "you cannot just walk in here off the street and demand we freeze corporate accounts. Let me see your identification." I pulled my damp driver license from my wallet and handed it to her. She snatched it from my fingers, typed my information into her terminal, and stared at the glowing monitor. A moment later, she let out a sharp, mocking sigh. "Well, Claire," she said, emphasizing my first name with deep disrespect, "I cannot pull any transaction history for you, because you do not have authorization on this specific corporate account, and frankly, looking at your personal financial profile, I am amazed you even have the nerve to walk into this branch today." "What are you talking about?" I snapped, gripping the edge of the glass counter to steady my shaking hands. "My name is on the original deed to that house. Your name is also on 7 heavily defaulted credit lines." She shot back, turning her monitor slightly, so I could see the glaring red alerts covering my profile. "Your credit score is practically non-existent. It is currently sitting at an abysmal 410. You have maxed out credit cards, multiple shadow accounts in severe delinquency, and a vehicle repossession order that officially executed this morning. You are a massive financial liability. We would not even approve you for a $50 overdraft, let alone grant you access to a multi-million-dollar corporate ledger." I stared at the screen, my heart dropping entirely into my stomach. Harrison had not just canceled my supplementary cards. Over the last 2 years, he had secretly opened multiple shadow credit cards using my social security number. He had maxed them out to silently fund his lavish lifestyle and deliberately let them default, utterly destroying my financial identity without my knowledge. He had built a flawless, invisible cage around me. "You do not understand," I pleaded, desperation finally creeping into my voice. "Those accounts are entirely fraudulent. My ex-husband opened them without my consent. You have to look at the collateral agreement on that commercial loan. He forged my signature to leverage my house. If you do not flag this right now, he is going to embezzle those funds." The teller rolled her eyes completely, losing her patience with me. She grabbed my damp driver license and tossed it carelessly back across the counter. It slid off the slit glass and landed on the wet floor. "I understand perfectly," she sneered, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of the bank manager standing across the lobby. "You are a delinquent debtor trying to blame your ex-husband for your own terrible financial choices. I am not going to entertain this ridiculous conspiracy theory, and I am certainly not going to let you drip mud all over my station any longer." She reached out and firmly pressed a red button on her desk phone. "Security, we need assistance at Station 4, she announced over the intercom. "We have a loitering vagrant who is refusing to leave the premises. Please escort her out immediately." I stood frozen, the heavy weight of absolute defeat crashing down on me. I had nothing left. No money, no car, no home, and now no identity. 2 large security guards in dark suits began walking briskly toward me from the front entrance. I bent down to pick up my driver license from the dirty floor. As my fingers brushed against my leather wallet, they grazed a small, hidden zipper compartment tucked deep inside the billfold. My breath caught in my throat. I stopped moving entirely. 5 years ago, just days before he passed away from a sudden heart attack, my father Thomas had handed me a small sealed envelope. He told me to put it in my wallet and never open it unless I had absolutely nowhere else to turn. I had completely forgotten it existed until this exact moment. The security guards were 10 feet away. "Mom, you need to step away from the counter and come with us," the taller guard ordered, reaching out to grab my arm. I ignored him. My fingers dug into the hidden zipper. I ripped it open and pulled out the contents. It was not a piece of paper or a check. It was a solid, heavy matte black metal card. It had no bank logo, no phone number, and no visible account details. The only marking was a faint, deeply embossed silver insignia in the center, and a thick magnetic strip on the back. I stood up straight, brushing the guard's hand away with a sudden, icy confidence. I looked the junior teller dead in the eye and slammed the heavy black metal card onto the glass counter. The thick metal hit the glass with a loud, authoritative crack that echoed across the entire silent bank floor. "Run the card," I commanded. The junior teller stared at the heavy piece of metal resting on her pristine glass counter. She blinked slowly, entirely, unfazed by my sudden burst of authority. Instead of picking it up to swipe it through her terminal, she let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. She picked up the black card using only her thumb and index finger, holding it up to the fluorescent lights, as if it were a dirty, disease-ridden napkin. "What exactly is this supposed to be?" she asked, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. There is no microchip. There is no bank logo. The magnetic strip on the back is completely worn down. Are you trying to hand me a novelty gift card, Claire? Do you really think a fake piece of metal is going to suddenly wipe away your massive debt and fix your pathetic credit score? The two security guards had now reached my side. The taller one clamped his heavy hand down on my left shoulder, his grip tightening painfully through my soaked coat. "That is enough of a scene for today, Ma," and the guard said gruffly. "You are coming with us right now. We can do this the easy way, or we can call the local police to handle your trespassing charge." I tried to jerk my shoulder away, but his grip was like a vice. I kept my eyes locked on the teller, refusing to let her see my fear. I said, "Run the card," I repeated, my voice rising in volume, echoing across the quiet marble-lined lobby. The teller rolled her eyes, dropping all pretense of professional courtesy. "I am not running a fake piece of metal through my secure terminal just to humor a delusional debtor," she snapped. "In fact, since you are attempting to present fraudulent financial instruments to a federally insured institution, it is banking policy to confiscate and destroy the counterfeit item." She opened the top drawer of her desk and pulled out a long, heavy pair of stainless steel scissors. She positioned the blades directly over the center of the black metal card, preparing to cut it straight in half. I panicked, lunging forward to grab it, but the security guard yanked me back so hard. My ribs slammed into his forearm. My father had given me that card on his deathbed. It was the only thing I had left of him, the last physical connection to the man who had raised me. "Wait," I yelled, struggling against the heavy guard. "Do not touch that. Give it back to me." The teller ignored me completely, aligning the sharp metal blades over the faint silver insignia, applying intense pressure to snap the metal. At that exact moment, the heavy wooden doors of the executive offices swung open. Mr. Mitchell, the 50-year-old stoic branch manager, stepped out onto the lobby floor. He was a man who exuded quiet absolute power, dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit, holding a leather-bound tablet. I was deep in conversation with a wealthy local real estate developer, guiding him toward the main exit. As Mitchell walked past the teller station, the overhead fluorescent lights caught the metallic surface of the black card, just as the teller prepared to destroy it. The faint, deeply embossed silver insignia flashed brightly in the light. Mitchell stopped dead in his tracks. He did not just pause. His entire body physically froze, as if someone had injected ice water directly into his veins. The expensive leather-bound tablet slipped from his fingers, hitting the marble floor with a loud, echoing smack. The wealthy developer beside him frowned, asking if he was all right. But Mitchell did not even hear him. All the blood instantly drained from his face, leaving his skin a pale, sickly ash color. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. "What on earth are you doing?" Mitchell roared his deep voice, shattering the quiet atmosphere of the entire bank. He lunged forward with a speed that entirely defied his age. He reached across the glass counter and violently slapped the stainless steel scissors right out of the junior teller's hand. The heavy scissors flew through the air and crashed against the back wall, narrowly missing an expensive glass partition. The teller shrieked, jumping back in her ergonomic chair. "Mr. Mitchell?" she stammered, her face flushed with extreme shock and confusion. "I was just confiscating a fake card from this vagrant. She is severely delinquent, and she is causing a massive disturbance on the floor." Mitchell did not even look at her. He leaned over the counter, staring at the black metal card as if it were a live explosive. He carefully picked it up by the edges, his hands shaking so violently, the metal rattled against the glass surface. He brought it inches from his face, tracing the faint silver insignia with a trembling thumb. He spun around to face the teller, his eyes blazing with a fury so intense it made the young woman shrink back into her chair. "Mom, quickly, look at this," Mitchell shouted, his voice cracking with absolute panic as he shoved the card toward her face. "Do you have any idea what you just tried to destroy? Do you have any concept of whose insignia this is?" The teller shook her head, tears of humiliation welling up in her eyes. I just assumed it was a novelty card, sir. Her credit score is in the 400s. Mitchell slammed his fist against the desk, silencing her instantly. You are fired, he stated, his voice dropping to a deadly absolute whisper. Pack up your personal belongings immediately. You are permanently terminated from this institution, and I will personally ensure you never work in the financial sector again. Now get out of my sight. The teller burst into loud sobs, grabbing her purse and sprinting away from the desk in pure shame. The two security guards instantly let go of my arms, taking several nervous steps backward. The entire bank floor had fallen completely silent. The wealthy clients on the plush leather couches stopped drinking their espresso, staring at the scene in absolute shock. Mitchell took a deep, shuddering breath, trying desperately to regain his professional composure. He turned to me. The absolute power and authority he had just displayed vanished instantly, replaced by a posture of deep, undeniable reverence. He adjusted his suit jacket, stepped around the glass counter, and bowed his head slightly toward me. Emma, I sincerely apologize for the inexcusable behavior of my former staff, Mitchell said, his voice trembling with deep respect. We had no idea you were coming today. Please forgive this catastrophic breach of protocol. I stood there still dripping wet from the rain, my ruined shoes pooling muddy water on the expensive marble floor. I was utterly bewildered. 5 minutes ago, I was a loitering vagrant about to be thrown into the freezing street. Now the most powerful man in the building was bowing to me. Do you know what this card is? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mitchell nodded slowly, holding the heavy black metal with the utmost care. I do, Ma. I have worked in upper-tier banking for 30 years, and I have only ever seen one of these in person. It is a master ledger key. The security protocols for this account supersede every single rule in this branch. He gestured toward the back of the lobby with an open, inviting hand. Please come with me, he urged softly. We cannot discuss this on the public floor. He did not ask for my identification. He did not ask for my signature or mention my ruined credit score. He completely bypassed every security protocol, leading me past the velvet ropes and the staring clients. We walked down a long, quiet corridor lined with expensive artwork until we reached a set of heavy steel elevator doors. Mitchell pulled a physical key from his pocket, inserted it into a hidden panel on the wall, and turned it. The door slid open, revealing a private elevator car lined with dark mahogany and brushed steel. I stepped inside, clutching my damp laptop bag tightly to my chest. Mitchell followed me, pressing a single button marked with a negative symbol. We were not going to the executive suite on the upper floors. We were descending deep underground, heading straight down into the subterranean VIP vault. The elevator descended in absolute silence, the gentle hum of the mechanics, the only sound in the small mahogany cabin. When the doors finally slid open, I stepped out into a sprawling subterranean room, made entirely of polished concrete and reinforced glass. There were no teller windows here, only a massive central console surrounded by heavy steel monitors. Mitchell walked briskly to the console and gestured for me to sit in a plush leather chair. He took the black metal card from his pocket with extreme care and slid it into a specialized biometric scanner. The heavy steel monitors instantly flashed a brilliant emerald green. A complex web of financial data flooded the screens, scrolling faster than my eyes could follow. Mitchell turned to me, his posture stiff and formal, addressing me with absolute reverence. Welcome back, Miss Claire, he said softly. The trust has been awaiting your arrival for 5 years. I shook my head in utter confusion, shivering slightly in my damp clothes. Trust, I repeated. My father was a quiet middle-class hardware supplier. He ran a small shop in Fairfield. He did not have a trust. Mitchell offered a gentle, knowing smile. Thomas was a brilliant man who valued his privacy above all else. The hardware store was merely a quiet hobby, a front to keep his family shielded from the vicious nature of his true work. Your father was the silent architect of one of the most ruthless corporate debt acquisition firms on the East Coast. He engineered hostile takeovers, bought distressed assets, and liquidated failing companies. Hy hid his true wealth behind a meticulously structured blind trust to protect you from the dangerous people he dealt with. Mitchell tapped the glass screen, bringing up a centralized dashboard. The numbers on the screen were so large they looked completely unreal. The trust contains over $80 million in liquid assets, along with a massive portfolio of commercial real estate, Mitchell explained, pointing to the glowing figures. Because it is an irrevocable blind trust established long before your marriage, every single penny is legally shielded from any marital property claims. Your husband has zero claim to this money. I sat absolutely frozen in the plush leather chair. $80 million. Hours ago, I had only $14 to my name and was forced to sleep in my freezing car. Now, I easily possessed more than enough liquid capital to buy Harrison's entire firm 10 times over. But the shock of the inheritance was nothing compared to what Mitchell showed me next. He pulled up a specific subsidiary ledger, his expression turning grim. "Miss Claire, I need you to look at this," he said, enlarging a document on the central monitor. I traced the digital ledger with my index finger, completely unable to breathe. One of the subsidiary, corporate lenders owned entirely by my father's secretive trust was the exact same firm that had quietly issued Harrison's fraudulent $2 million business loan against my residential property. I stared at the glowing green text on the monitor, the reality of the situation slowly washing over me. Harrison had not outsmarted me. He had unwittingly walked straight into a trap my father had built years ago. I did not just have the money to fight him. I literally owned the debt that was keeping his entire venture capital firm afloat. If I called in that loan, his entire fabricated world would collapse overnight before I could fully process the immense power I now held. Mitchell picked up a secure phone on the console and pressed a single button. "We need counsel in the vault immediately," he said quietly. Less than 2 minutes later, the heavy steel elevator doors slid open again. A woman walked in carrying a sleek leather briefcase. She was tall in her mid-40s with sharp features and an impeccably tailored suit that screamed absolute authority. Mitchell introduced her as Veronica, a razor-sharp corporate financial lawyer, retained exclusively by the trust. I reached into my damp pocket, pulled out the crumpled commercial loan statement Jamal had secretly handed me on the porch, and placed it on the concrete table. Veronica did not ask any pointless questions about my ruined clothes or my muddy shoes. She simply opened her briefcase, pulled out a high-resolution scanner, and digitized the wrinkled paper. The document instantly appeared on the massive central monitor. Veronica typed a rapid sequence of commands, bypassing multiple banking firewalls to access the original digital loan application Harrison had submitted 30 days ago. She isolated the final page of the contract and zoomed in heavily on the collateral agreement. The screen displayed a high-defin scan of a notarized deed transfer. At the very bottom, next to Harrison's bold handwriting, was my own signature, or at least an incredibly desperate attempt at it. Veronica leaned closer to the screen, her eyes scanning the digital ink with predatory focus. "This is a complete fabrication," Veronica stated, her voice as cold as ice. "The pressure points on the pen strokes do not match your historical banking signatures. Harrison forged your name on this document and transmitted it across state lines to secure these funds. He has committed federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and severe bank fraud." Veronica turned to face me, closing her laptop with a sharp snap. "We can contact the federal authorities right now, Claire. With this undeniable evidence, agents will raid his office by noon, and he will be sitting in a federal holding cell by dinner." The option was deeply tempting. The thought of seeing Harrison in handcuffs today sent a thrill through my chest. But as I thought about him and Kendall laughing at me in the freezing rain, a darker realization took root in my mind. Sending him to prison today was entirely too quick. It was too merciful. I did not want him to just lose his freedom. I wanted him to lose absolutely everything he loved first. "Do not call the authorities yet," I told Veronica, leaning back in the plush leather chair with a new dangerous confidence. "Let him spend the stolen money. Let him inflate his arrogant lifestyle until he is completely trapped. We are going to tear his empire down piece by piece." Veronica smiled. It was a sharp, predatory grin that perfectly mirrored the new dangerous energy surging through my veins. She closed the digital ledger on the massive central monitor and leaned forward, resting her elbows on the concrete table. She understood exactly what I wanted. We were not going to rely on the slow bureaucratic wheels of the federal justice system to punish him. We were going to build a massive financial guillotine and let him eagerly pull the lever himself. Over the next 2 hours, sitting in the absolute security of that underground vault, Veronica and I mapped out a complete financial siege. I authorized her to deploy a fraction of the trust's massive liquid capital to execute a silent, aggressive acquisition strategy. I authorized Veronica to hire a specialized team of forensic accountants to track every single dollar Harrison moved. We discovered he was using a fragile web of bridge loans to fund his day-to-day operations. It was a pathetic, airish setup, using a complex network of anonymous corporate shell companies. Veronica began quietly hunting down every single outstanding line of credit tied to Harrison's venture capital firm and Kendall's commercial real estate business. We bought his equipment leases. We systematically bought out the lenders holding his bridge loans. We acquired the debt on the expensive servers powering his office, the lease on his imported espresso machines, and even the financing on the high-end artwork he hung in his lobby to impress potential clients. We even bought the secondary financing Kendall used to fund her expensive broker wardrobe. Within 48 hours, my holding companies legally owned every single financial obligation Harrison had to his name. I was his absolute master, yet he was completely oblivious, dancing wildly on a trapdoor I controlled. While I was quietly buying up the very foundation of his life, Harrison was busy celebrating what he wholeheartedly believed was his ultimate victory. Assuming I was still sleeping in my ruined 10-year-old sedan and begging for spare change outside budget motel, he shifted his arrogant spending into complete overdrive. Believing the forged $2 million loan provided an endless safety net, he immediately signed luxury leases on matching custom-ordered sports cars for himself and Kendall. He rented a massive, entirely unnecessary glass corner office in the most expensive commercial district in the city, signing a 10-year lease he could never actually afford. To stroke his own massive ego and project the image of a titan, Harrison began aggressive, completely unsustainable hiring for his startup. He poached dozens of junior executives and analysts from competing firms, offering them exorbitant signing bonuses. Despite having absolutely no long-term revenue streams to support payroll, he was aggressively bleeding cash every single day, entirely convinced his fraudulent financial maneuvering made him invincible. Kendall was equally intoxicated by the sudden influx of stolen wealth. A week later, I sat in the luxurious high-rise hotel suite Veronica had secured for me, wearing a plush robe that actually belonged to me, and opened my new smartphone. I clicked on a video Kendall had just proudly posted to her public social media feed. She was holding a glass of champagne, giving her thousands of followers a grand tour of the suburban home I had carefully decorated over the last 4 years. She strutted through the living room, explicitly mocking my taste in furniture before holding up her left hand to the camera. "You are nothing but a pathetic charity case. We are terminating you effective immediately, and security will escort you out right now." My sister-in-law's shrill voice echoed across the crowded marble lobby of my family's corporate headquarters, making dozens of employees stop and stare. It was 8:45 in the morning on my very first day as a low-level data entry clerk. She sneered at my clothes, reveling in her power trip, completely unaware that I was not there to collect a paycheck. I calmly unclipped my temporary visitor badge, handed it to her, and smiled. I told her to tell my father that the emergency board meeting in exactly 5 hours was going to be absolutely unforgettable. She had no idea that the anonymous billionaire savior arriving at 2:00 to bail out their bankrupt company was actually me, and I had already bought 80% of their voting shares. My name is Naomi, and I am 33 years old. Before I share exactly how I dismantled my toxic family's empire piece by piece, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to smile through the pain while an arrogant family member tried to tear you down. The morning sun was streaming through the massive glass walls of Apex Solutions, casting long shadows across the imported Italian marble floors. Apex was a mid-sized logistics firm that my father Harrison had built into his personal monument. The lobby was bustling with employees rushing to catch the elevators, clutching their coffees and preparing for the workday. I had barely stepped through the revolving doors when Lexi intercepted me. Lexi was my brother Cameron's wife, a woman who wore her unearned title of Human Resources Director like a weapon. She was dressed in an overly branded designer outfit that screamed of new money and deep insecurity. Her eyes narrowed with a predatory gleam the moment she spotted me. She did not even wait for me to reach the security desk. She marched right into the center of the atrium, blocking my path. "Stop right there, Naomi," she commanded, raising her voice so that the nearest groups of employees would hear. People immediately began to slow their pace, glancing over their shoulders with thinly veiled curiosity. "Lexi," I said evenly, keeping my hands relaxed at my sides. "Good morning to you too. I am just heading up to the 4th floor to get my desk assignment." "You are not going anywhere except back out those doors," she announced, crossing her arms over her chest. "I just got off the phone with Harrison. We have decided that bringing you on board is way too much of a liability for Apex. Your father only offered you this data entry job because your mother begged him to take pity on you. But frankly, we cannot afford to carry dead weight, not even family." I stood perfectly still, letting her cruel words hang in the air. The murmurs around the lobby grew louder. I knew exactly what she was doing. This was a public execution designed to put the family disappointment back in her place. For years, they had spun a narrative that I was an utter failure because I had refused to follow my father's rigid, misogynistic corporate path. I had moved away, lived quietly, and built my own venture capital firm from the ground up. Because I never flaunted my wealth or begged for their approval, they naturally assumed I was destitute. Lexi took a step closer, looking me up and down with exaggerated disgust. "I mean, look at you," she scoffed, gesturing toward my outfit. I was wearing a bespoke, unbranded charcoal suit that cost more than her entire wardrobe, but she lacked the refinement to recognize quiet luxury. "You show up on your first day, looking like you bought your clothes at a thrift store. Did you really think you could just waltz into a professional corporate environment after squandering your life on those stupid startup fantasies? Cameron warned me you would be a disaster, but I did not think you would embarrass us before 9. "I assure you, Lexi, I am dressed perfectly for the business I am conducting today," I replied, my voice calm and completely devoid of the panic she was so desperately trying to provoke. Her face flushed with hot irritation at my lack of tears. She had fully expected me to crumble to beg for the minimum wage job, to ask her to call my father and plead on my behalf. When I did none of those things, her voice grew louder and significantly harsher. "Do not talk back to me in my lobby," she snapped. "Cameron has been working 18-hour days to keep this company afloat. He is a brilliant chief operating officer, and he does not have time to hold his little sister's hand while she pretends to be a working professional. You threw your life away, Naomi. You refused to listen to Harrison. You wasted whatever money you had. And now you expect us to clean up your mess. Well, the charity stops today. We are terminating you effective immediately. Security will escort you out." She snapped her fingers toward 2 large security guards standing near the reception desk. They exchanged uncomfortable glances, but dutifully began walking toward us. The humiliation was supposed to break me right there on the polished marble floor. My family had always used public shame to enforce obedience, a toxic tactic spearheaded by my father and perfected by his golden child, Cameron. But I was not the scared 20-year-old girl they remembered. I felt no urge to defend myself or explain that my so-called stupid startup fantasies had evolved into a massive private equity firm. I felt no need to tell her that Cameron was not a brilliant executive, but a corrupt thief who had embezzled millions to fund his sports cars and luxury vacations, driving Apex Solutions into catastrophic debt. They were drowning, and they thought kicking me off the boat would somehow save them. I reached up and calmly unclipped the temporary paper visitor badge from my lapel. I held it out to her. Lexi snatched it from my hand, a victorious smirk plastered across her face. "Smart girl," she sneered. "Now turn around and walk out before I have them physically throw you out." I looked her dead in the eyes, my expression entirely unreadable. "I want to do this right, Lexi," I said. my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a cold, terrifying authority. Tell your father-in-law that the board meeting in exactly 5 hours should be highly interesting. I highly recommend you and Cameron attend. It will be the most important meeting of your entire lives. Lexi scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. You are completely delusional. That board meeting is for executive leadership and our new investors. It has nothing to do with a fired data entry clerk. Just deliver the message, I said smoothly. I turned on my heel and walked toward the revolving doors. I did not look back. I did not rush. I walked with the measured, deliberate pace of someone who owned the very ground they were stepping on. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, I bypassed the crowded bus stop that my family assumed I would be using. Instead, I walked straight to the curb where a sleek armored black Maybach was waiting idly. The uniformed driver immediately stepped out, opening the rear door for me with a respectful nod. I slid into the plush leather interior, the heavy door shutting solidly behind me, instantly silencing the noise of the city street. I reached into my designer handbag, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I knew by heart. My lead corporate attorney answered on the first ring. Mitchell, I said, leaning back against the luxurious headrest. Lexi just played her part perfectly in the lobby. I am officially terminated from Apex Solutions. Excellent, Mitchell replied, his voice practically humming with predatory legal efficiency. I assume we are a go for Phase 2. We are an absolute go, I instructed coldly. Begin the assets freeze on Apex Solutions immediately. Lock down their corporate accounts and notify the bank that the majority shareholder is invoking the debt covenants. I do not want to leave Harrison or Cameron a single cent to maneuver with before 2-0. Consider it done, Naomi. They will not even be able to buy a cup of coffee with company funds by noon. I ended the call and looked out the tinted window. As the Maybach glided away from the building, my family thought they had just disposed of their biggest embarrassment. They had absolutely no clue they had just finalized their own absolute destruction. My phone began to vibrate against the leather seat, a relentless, angry buzzing that signaled the beginning of the digital assault. I glanced down at the screen. The notifications were flooding in from the family group chat, ironically titled Apex Legacy. My father Harrison was the first to strike. His message was a wall of capitalized letters and fury. Naomi, what on earth is wrong with you? Lexi just called me practically in tears. You caused a massive scene in the main atrium and forced her to call corporate security on your very first day. You are an absolute disgrace to this family. We try to throw you a lifeline and you publicly humiliate us. Before I could even process the sheer absurdity of Lexi, claiming to be in tears, a second message popped up. This one was from my mother, Catherine. I literally begged your father to give you this data entry job, Naomi. We opened our doors to you. We gave you a chance to finally do some honest work after your ridiculous entrepreneurial failures. And this is how you repay our generosity. Why cannot you just be compliant and grateful for once in your life? Look at your brother. Cameron has been working himself to the bone for this company. He carries the weight of the entire family on his shoulders. And you cannot even manage to walk through the front door without throwing a childish tantrum. I read the words with cold clinical detachment. Years ago, texts like these would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety and self-doubt. I would have drafted a dozen apologies, desperately trying to explain my side of the story, begging them to understand that Lexi had ambushed me. But the gaslighting was so incredibly textbook now that it bordered on boring. It was the same script they had been reading from since I was a teenager. I stared at Catherine's praise for Cameron, remembering exactly how my brother had earned his reputation as the family genius. When I was 22, I had spent 6 months researching and drafting a comprehensive digital expansion strategy for Apex Solutions. I had proudly brought the binder to Harrison's home office, outlining how the company could cut costs by 30%. Harrison had chuckled, patted me on the shoulder, and told me to leave the heavy lifting to the men. He suggested I focus on finding a suitable husband instead. 2 months later, Cameron presented that exact same binder at a Sunday family dinner. He had simply swapped my name for his on the title page. Harrison had treated Cameron to an extravagant steak dinner, praising his visionary mind. and promoted him to vice president of strategy. The very next day, Catherine had purchased Cameron a $30,000 watch to celebrate his brilliance. When I tried to speak up when I cried and pointed out that it was my work, Catherine had pulled me into the kitchen and pinched my arm hard. She told me I was being hysterical and bitter. She hissed that a good sister supports her brother's success instead of trying to steal his spotlight. They had convinced everyone that I was a jealous, unstable failure. They repeated the lie so often that they actually believed it themselves. I locked my phone screen, letting it go dark. I would not reply. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to defend myself so they could twist my words and play the victims. I was going to give them nothing but absolute silence. A few minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time it was an incoming call, not a text. The name on the screen made me sit up slightly straighter. It was Elijah, was my sister Brittany's husband. He was a brilliant, hardworking African-American man with a master's degree in supply chain logistics. He was also the only person in the entire extended family who possessed an ounce of integrity. Naturally, my family treated him appallingly. Harrison constantly undermined Elijah's operational plans at Apex, intentionally passing over his data-driven strategies to implement Cameron's disastrous, expensive ideas. Catherine frequently made passive-aggressive comments about Elijah's background, treating him as an outsider who should be grateful they allowed him to marry Brittany. I answered the call. "Hello, Elijah. Naomi, are you okay?" His voice was hushed and urgent, echoing slightly, as if you were hiding in one of the concrete stairwells. "I just saw the whole thing go down in the lobby. I saw Lexi confront you. I know you did not cause a scene. I was watching from the mezzanine balcony." A small, genuine smile touched my lips. Elijah had always been observant. He was the only person who consistently remembered my birthday. He was the only one who would casually bring me a plate of food at family barbecues, when Catherine deliberately forgot to set a place for me at the main table. "I am perfectly fine, Elijah," I said, my voice steady and warm. "I appreciate you checking on me. I really do." Lexi is parading around the Human Resources Department, acting like she just survived a hostage situation. Elijah continued, his voice dropping even lower. "But that is not why I am calling. Something really bad is happening up on the executive floor. Cameron has been shredding documents and physically destroying hard drives in his office all morning. He looks like a cornered animal. Harrison is sweating bullets about this too. 00 board meeting with the new investors. I think the company is going under, Naomi. I think they brought you in to pin something on you. They cannot pin anything on me if I do not work there," I replied smoothly. "And Elijah, you are right. The company is in critical condition. Cameron has been cooking the books for years, and Harrison has been signing off on it." I knew it. Elijah breathed a mixture of validation and dread in his tone. "I warned Harrison about the missing capital expenditure 6 months ago, and he threatened to fire me. Listen to me very carefully, Elijah," I said, my tone shifting to absolute authority. "I want you to go back to your office right now. Do not wait for your lunch break. Do not draw attention to yourself. I want you to quietly pack up all of your personal belongings, your photos, your degrees, your coffee mug. Put everything in your car, and then leave the building. Take the rest of the day off." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Elijah was smart enough to recognize a genuine warning when he heard one. "Naomi, what exactly is going to happen at 2?" he asked quietly. "Justice," I answered. "Just pack your things, Elijah. You are the only decent person in that building, and I do not want you caught in the crossfire when the walls come crashing down." I ended the call with Elijah and let my phone drop into my lap. The heavy silence of the armored vehicle wrapped around me. Once again, the smooth hum of the engine, a stark contrast to the absolute chaos I knew was currently unfolding inside the Apex Solutions headquarters. As my driver navigated the crowded city streets, I pulled a secured tablet from my leather briefcase and opened the master financial file. The irony of the entire situation was almost physically palpable. Just 3 weeks ago, my father had summoned me to a formal family dinner. He had put on a pathetic display of parental magnanimity, telling me that despite my ongoing failures to launch a successful career, the family was willing to throw me a lifeline. He had offered me a data entry position that paid barely above minimum wage. He framed it as a profound charity case, a generous favor from a loving father to a deeply misguided daughter. The reality staring back at me from the glowing screen of my tablet was vastly different. Apex Solutions was bleeding cash at an unprecedented catastrophic rate. Cameron had driven their operating margins into the ground with disastrous logistical contracts and massive ego-driven marketing campaigns that yielded zero return on investment. The company was drowning in defaulted loans, desperately fighting off aggressive creditors daily. Harrison thought he was playing a brilliant game of corporate chess. He firmly believed that today, at exactly 2 in the afternoon, a mysterious billionaire savior from a massive private equity conglomerate was arriving to bail them out. He had spent the last month practically groveling to my firm's representatives through third-party, ego-driven marketing campaigns that yielded zero return on investment. The company was drowning in defaulted loans, desperately fighting off aggressive creditors daily. Harrison thought he was playing a brilliant game of corporate chess. He firmly believed that today, at exactly 2 in the afternoon, a mysterious billionaire savior from a massive private equity conglomerate was arriving to bail them out. He had spent the last month practically groveling to my firm's representatives through third-party intermediaries, promising them the moon and the stars if they would just inject enough capital to save his crumbling legacy. He had absolutely no idea that the conglomerate buying out his defaulting debt was entirely owned by me. I had spent the last 12 months quietly acquiring every single piece of toxic debt Apex Solutions had generated. My firm had purchased their outstanding loans for pennies on the dollar through various shell companies and subsidiary funds. Today was not a friendly bailout. It was a hostile, merciless debt-to-equity swap. By 2 exactly, my firm would legally convert that mountain of debt into a controlling 80% stake in Apex Solutions. The family thought they were keeping their empire. In reality, they had already lost it, and I was simply arriving to hand them their eviction notices. The Maybach glided to a smooth halt in front of a soaring ultramodern high-rise in the city's most exclusive district. The doorman, recognizing the vehicle, immediately stepped forward to open the heavy glass door, greeting me with a deeply respectful nod. I bypassed the main lobby and took the private elevator directly to the top floor. The doors slid open silently, revealing my hidden sanctuary. It was a sprawling $12 million penthouse with panoramic views of the skyline, custom imported furniture, and museum-quality ultramodern high-rise in the city's most exclusive district. The doorman, recognizing the vehicle, immediately stepped forward to open the heavy glass door, greeting me with a deeply respectful nod. I bypassed the main lobby and took the private elevator directly to the top floor. The door slid open silently, revealing my hidden sanctuary. It was a sprawling $12 million penthouse with panoramic views of the skyline, custom imported furniture, and museum-quality art. It was a pristine world completely separate from the toxic grip of my family. Nobody in the Apex Circle knew this place existed. Not my parents, not Cameron, not Lexi. The only person who had access to this sanctuary was Todd, my boyfriend of 2 years. I had always believed Todd was my safe harbor. When I returned home exhausted from ruthlessly building my firm, he was the one pouring the wine and listening to my frustrations. I walked across the plush carpet, the thick material absorbing the sound of my footsteps completely. I expected to find Todd in the kitchen, making his morning coffee, but the room was empty. A low voice drifted down the hallway from my private study. I approached quietly, assuming he was on a work call, but as I drew closer, the specific cadence of his voice and the name he spoke made my blood run instantly cold. Todd was sitting in my leather desk chair, his back to the open door, speaking animatedly into his phone. "Yes, Cameron, I am telling you, you have absolutely nothing to worry about," Todd was saying, a sickeningly ingratiating tone dripping from his voice. "Naomi is completely oblivious. She left for the office early this morning, thinking she was actually going to be doing data entry. She genuinely believes your father is trying to help her out. I have been telling her all week how lucky she is to finally have a stable job." He paused, listening to my brother on the other end of the line. "I know. I know. Todd chuckled, a cruel, mocking sound that sent a shockwave of absolute disgust through my chest. She is delusional. She keeps rambling about her little startup investments, but I have kept her totally distracted just like we agreed. She is manageable. Now, regarding that vice president of business development position we discussed. You promised me the title and the six-figure salary would be finalized before the end of the quarter. I am doing my part, Cameron. I am keeping the family embarrassment out of your hair. I stood frozen in this doorway, staring at the back of the man I thought I loved. The betrayal was so absolute, so meticulously calculated that it temporarily stole the breath from my lungs. Todd was not my safe harbor. He was a spy, a paid informant planted in my life by my own brother. He was leaking my daily schedule, my private conversations, and my emotional state directly to the family that despised me, all to secure a prestigious job title at a company that was secretly bankrupt. He had sold my trust to advance his own pathetic career. I took a single step into the study. The sound of my designer heel, clicking against the hardwood floor, was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Todd whipped around, his eyes widening in sheer, absolute panic as he realized I was standing in the doorway. I stepped back into the sprawling marble hallway of my penthouse, leaving Todd to stew in his own terror for a moment. I glanced at the glowing screen. The name flashing was Elijah. Elijah was my brother-in-law, married to my superficial status-obsessed sister Brittany. More importantly, Elijah was an exceptionally brilliant African-American man, holding a master's degree in supply chain logistics from a top-tier university. He was the operations manager at Apex Solutions, a title that grossly underestimated his actual intellectual capacity and his daily contributions to the firm. My family, completely blinded by their own deep-seated prejudices and blatant nepotism, constantly undermined him. Harrison and Cameron treated him as a glorified assistant, intentionally dismissing his data-driven strategies simply because he did not fit their narrow, bigoted view of what a corporate leader should look like. They marginalized him at every family dinner, and they ignored his operational warnings in every board meeting. Brittany was no better, treating her husband as a mere accessory rather than an equal partner. Despite being the smartest man in any room, he walked into Elijah was suffocated by my family's toxic culture. Yet, he was the only person connected to the Apex bloodline who had ever treated me with genuine, unadulterated respect. I pressed the answer button and brought the phone to my ear, keeping my eyes locked on the study door where Todd was trapped. "Hello, Elijah," I said, my voice completely stripped of the rage that was currently burning through my veins regarding Todd's betrayal. "Naomi, are you okay?" Elijah asked immediately. His voice was hushed, carrying a slight echo that suggested he was speaking from a secure location, likely one of the concrete stairwells at the Apex headquarters. The genuine concern in his tone was a sharp contrast to the deceit I had just uncovered in my own home. "I saw the entire thing go down in the lobby this morning. I was walking across the mezzanine balcony when Lexi cornered you." "I am perfectly fine, Elijah," I replied smoothly, leaning against the cool wall of the hallway. It was exactly the kind of theatrical performance I expected from her. "It was a complete setup," Elijah continued, his voice tight with suppressed frustration. "Lexi had security position near the elevators before you even walked through the front revolving doors. She orchestrated the entire public shaming to make a point. I wanted to come down there and intervene, Naomi. I really did. But Harrison has been breathing down my neck all week, threatening to terminate my department's funding if I step out of line. I would never want you to risk your position to defend me," I assured him, feeling a surge of profound appreciation for the lone supporter I had in that wretched building. "Lex's little power trip is the least of my concerns today. That is actually why I'm calling you privately," Elijah said, his tone shifting from personal concern to sharp, urgent professionalism. "Lex's stunt in the lobby is just a distraction. Something massive and incredibly dangerous is happening on the executive floor right now. I have been running independent audits on the supply chain accounts for the past 3 months because the vendor invoices were not matching our delivery manifests." I listened intently, allowing the silence to encourage him to continue. "Cameron has been cooking the books, Naomi. Elijah revealed the heavy weight of the secret evident in his hushed whisper. He has been funneling millions of dollars through phantom logistics vendors. We are paying for massive freight shipments that simply do not exist. The money is being routed to offshore holding accounts. When I tried to bring the discrepancy to Harrison's attention last week, he completely shut me down and told me I was overstepping my bounds. But this morning, Cameron is in full panic mode. He is physically shredding documents in his suite. He is destroying hard drives. They are desperately trying to hide the financial bleeding before the Tule board meeting with the new investors. A cold, satisfied smile touched my lips. Elijah was sharp enough to catch the massive fraud that Harrison was desperately trying to bury. My brother-in-law was a phenomenal asset, entirely wasted on a family of corrupt fools who were too arrogant to utilize his talents. You are incredibly thorough, Elijah, I said, validating his brilliant investigative work. Your operational audits are flawlessly accurate. Cameron has indeed been embezzling corporate funds to support his luxury lifestyle, and Harrison has been fraudulently signing off on the quarterly reports to protect his golden child. They have effectively bankrupted Apex Solutions. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. You know about the phantom accounts, Naomi. If the new investors discover this during the buyout meeting this afternoon, Harrison and Cameron are going to face federal indictment. The entire company is going to implode today. Elijah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I instructed, my voice dropping to a register of absolute commanding authority. I value your integrity, and I value your mind. You are the only person in that building who actually understands how the company operates. Because of that, I am giving you a direct warning. A warning? He repeated, confusion mingling with realization. I want you to leave that stairwell, walk directly to your office and pack up your personal belongings, I told him clearly. Take your framed degrees, your photographs, and anything else you care about. Put them in your car and leave the Apex premises before 2. Do not tell Brittany. Do not warn Harrison. Just quietly remove yourself from the blast radius. The silence that followed was thick with dawning comprehension. Elijah was a brilliant man. He did not need me to spell out the exact details to understand that a catastrophic shift in power was imminent. He realized in that profound moment that the sister-in-law everyone dismissed as a failure was holding the detonator to the entire corporate empire. Understood, Elijah said quietly, asking no further questions. I am packing my things right now. Take care of yourself, Naomi. You too, Elijah, I replied. I will be in touch very soon. I ended the call and slipped the phone into my tailored pocket. The confirmation of Cameron's frantic document shredding was the perfect validation of my impending strike. The Apex Empire was already burning from the inside out. I turned my attention back to the study door, my expression hardening into a mask of pure ice. Elijah was safe. Now it was time to deal with the traitor standing in my home. I stepped back into the doorway, locking eyes with Todd, ready to systematically dismantle the man who thought he could sell me out to my own family. Todd's hand shook violently as he scrambled to press the end call button on his smartphone. The device slipped from his sweaty fingers, clattering loudly onto the polished mahogany desk. For a man who had just spent the last 10 minutes confidently negotiating his corporate future with my brother, he currently looked like a terrified child caught stealing from a cash register. His chest heaved as he tried to drag air into his lungs, his eyes darting frantically around my private study, as if searching for a hidden exit. There was none. He was trapped in the very sanctuary he had chosen to defile. This penthouse was supposed to be my absolute refuge. I had purchased this sprawling property entirely in cash, placing it under a blind trust to ensure my family could never trace my residence. It was a fortress designed to keep their relentless toxicity at bay. When I invited Todd to move in with me 6 months ago, I believed I was opening my safe haven to a partner who respected my boundaries. I had given him the access codes, the security clearances, and my complete trust. I had allowed him to share the one space in the world where I did not have to wear armor. Instead, I had willingly invited a parasite into my home. As I stood there watching his pathetic display of panic, the pieces of the past few months rapidly locked into place, with blinding clarity. The sudden, uncharacteristic phone calls from Catherine, demanding to know where I was on specific weekends. Harrison somehow, knowing exactly which coffee shop I frequented on Tuesday mornings, Cameron making snide, highly specific remarks about my supposed financial struggles during our rare family encounters. They had not been guessing. They had not been lucky. They had a direct informant sleeping in my bed. Todd swallowed hard, forcing a sickeningly artificial smile onto his face. He held his hands up and